My father measured affection in accolades and treated education like moral superiority. To him, I was just a cautionary tale, the daughter who amounted to nothing but a quiet address in a coastal town. He called me uneducated and worthless, convinced my silence was submission. He never realized that while he was building a legacy on stolen ground, I was building a life he could not touch, and holding the one secret that could finally bring his glass house down. I live my life in the margins of Meriton, Massachusetts, by choice. It is a city of salt air and gray shingles, where the ocean fog rolls in thick enough to swallow a person whole. Which is exactly how I like it. My apartment is a third-floor walk-up with a radiator that clanks like a dying engine and a view of the harbor that costs me less than half of what it should because the landlord prefers tenants who pay in cash and never complain. At 33, I have curated a life that looks remarkably small from the outside. I drive a sedan with a dent in the rear bumper. I wear sweaters that have been washed until the wool is soft and shapeless. When people ask what I do, I tell them I work in administrative support for a logistics firm. It is not a lie. Technically, I do handle logistics. I just happen to own the firm. And the logistics involve complex supply chain optimizations for mid-sized manufacturers who need to move freight without bleeding profit. My name is on the incorporation papers, but not on the website. I have a proxy for that. In Meriton, I am just Gabriella, the quiet woman who buys day-old bread and reads paperback novels on the pier during her lunch break. I like being underestimated. It is the only armor that has ever truly worked. The morning the email arrived, the fog was pressing against my kitchen window like a wet thumb. I was drinking coffee, black and bitter, scrolling through my personal inbox on a phone I kept separate from my business line. The subject line made my stomach turn over. Regarding the Eldon Ridge University Anonymous Benefactor Honor, my thumb hovered over the delete button. I had set up the scholarship fund 5 years ago, funneling the profits from my first major contract into a trust that paid tuition for adults returning to finish degrees they had been forced to abandon. I had stipulated total anonymity. I did not want a plaque. I did not want a dinner. I wanted to be the ghost in the machine, fixing the gears so others could move forward. I opened the email against my better judgment. They were planning a gala. They wanted to announce the name behind the trust. They used words like inspiration and legacy. I felt a cold prickle of sweat on the back of my neck. Legacy was a dangerous word. Legacy was the weapon my father used to bludgeon anyone who did not fit the precise, marble-carved image he had constructed of himself. If my name surfaced in a university press release, it would not just be a breach of privacy. It would be a signal flare to the man I had spent a decade outrunning. I hit delete. Then I went into the trash folder and permanently deleted it, as if erasing the digital footprint could erase the threat. I finished my coffee and told myself I was safe. I was Gabriella Price. Nobody of consequence. Then my phone rang. It was not the business line. It was the personal number only 3 people had. 2 of them were currently asleep in the next room or across town. The third was the man whose voice I had not heard in 14 months. The screen said, Charles Price. I stared at it. The vibration buzzed against the wooden table. A harsh, invasive sound in the quiet morning. I could have let it go to voicemail. I should have. But the conditioning of a childhood spent seeking his approval is a hard knot to untie. It pulls tight before you even realize you are reacting. I picked it up. Hello, Charles, I said. There was no greeting, no preamble, just the sharp, clipped baritone that sounded like it was coming from a podium rather than a phone. Gabriella, I assumed you would still be asleep. It is 7 a.m, I said, keeping my voice flat. I have been up for an hour. Yes, well, I suppose your schedule is less demanding than those of us with actual responsibilities. The insult was so casual, so practiced, that it almost didn't register. It was just the background noise of speaking to my father. What do you need? I asked. We are hosting the donor retreat at Hawthorne Hills this weekend, he said. The foundation is closing a significant partnership. Optics are critical. Elise and I expect you to attend. I gripped the phone tighter. Hawthorne Hills was a gated enclave 2 hours south, a place of manicured lawns and relentless scrutiny. It was the stage where Charles performed his best work as the benevolent philanthropist. "I can't," I said. "I have work." He laughed. It was a dry, airless sound. "Work, please. Do not pretend that whatever clerical temping you are doing constitutes a career. Gabriella, it is a job, a placeholder, and frankly, you can afford to miss a day of filing papers to support your family." "I am not coming. Charles, this is not a request," he snapped, the veneer of politeness vanishing. "People are asking questions. It looks strange that my eldest daughter is never seen. It implies dysfunction. I will not have my reputation tarnished because you are going through a decade-long phase of mediocrity." "Mediocrity," I repeated. "Look at your sister," he said, and I knew it was coming. The comparison, the golden standard. Miranda is running the outreach program for the Pricewell Civic Foundation. She is handling millions of dollars in grant money. She is building something. She is educated. Gabriella, she is useful. "I am happy for Miranda," I said, and I meant it, though it cost me to say it. Miranda was 4 years younger, the product of his second marriage to Elise. She had been molded in his image, polished and pressured until she shone. "You could have been her," Charles said, his voice dropping to a theatrical disappointment. "If you had just applied yourself, if you had the discipline, but you chose to be difficult, uneducated, and worthless. That is the reality you built." The words landed like physical blows. Uneducated. He believed I had dropped out of college after the divorce. He believed I had drifted from city to city, failing at everything I touched. He did not know about the night classes. He did not know about the dual degrees in supply chain management and business ethics I had earned while waiting tables. He did not know I owned a company that had just negotiated a contract worth more than his entire annual salary. He did not know because I never told him. Success, in his eyes, only counted if he had authorized it. "I am not coming to Hawthorne Hills," I said again, my voice shaking slightly. "You are coming," he said, "or you can forget about that small stipend I send to your aunt. I know she relies on it for her medication." The line went silent on my end. He wasn't talking about money for me. He knew he couldn't control me with cash anymore. I hadn't taken a dime from him in years. He was threatening Great Aunt Maeve, the only person on his side of the family who had ever sent me a birthday card. "That is low, Charles," I said, "even for you." "Friday night," he said. "Dinner is at 7. Wear something that does not look like you bought it at a garage sale. Try to pretend, just for one weekend, that you are not a failure." The line clicked dead. I lowered the phone and stared at the gray fog outside. My hand was trembling, not from fear, but from a rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins, uneducated and worthless. "He has a tell, you know." I turned. Naomi was leaning against the doorframe of the kitchen, her dark hair wrapped in a silk scarf, looking at me with eyes that missed nothing. Naomi Vance was my best friend, my roommate, and the only person in Meriton who knew exactly how much was in my bank account. She worked as a forensic accountant for the state, chasing down hidden assets in divorce cases. She had a nose for rot. "How long were you standing there?" I asked. "Long enough to hear the Uneducated and Worthless Greatest Hits tour," Naomi said. Walking over to the coffee pot, she poured herself a mug and leaned against the counter. "He sounded stressed." "He sounded like he always sounds," I said. "Arrogant?" "No," Naomi corrected. "He sounded pressed. Charles Price does not call the disappointment daughter unless he needs a prop. He creates a narrative. If he is dragging you out of the shadows, it is because he needs to show a united front." "Why?" "He said people are asking questions." "About you?" Naomi blew on her coffee. "Gabriella, nobody asks about the estranged daughter unless they are looking for cracks in the father. Someone is trying to patch a leak." I sat down at the table, rubbing my temples. "He threatened Maeve's medical bills." "Of course he did. He is a monster, but he is a strategic monster." Why this weekend? What is happening at the Pricewell Civic Foundation right now? He said they are closing a partnership, Naomi hummed, a sound of deep skepticism. I can look into it. My access is limited to public records unless I have a warrant, which I do not. But I can sniff around. Don't, I said. I don't want you involved. If he finds out I am digging, he will cut Maeve off just to spite me. So you are going? I don't have a choice. You always have a choice, Naomi said gently. You could pay Maeve's bills yourself. You have the money. You could write a check today and never speak to him again. I looked at her. She was right. I could reveal everything. I could show him my bank statements, my degrees, my client list. I could prove him wrong. But that wasn't what I wanted. I didn't want his respect. I wanted to understand why he was terrified. I am going, I said, but not for him. By noon, the fog had lifted, revealing a steel-gray ocean that chopped against the pilings of the pier. I took my lunch break at a small seafood shack near the water, the kind of place that served chowder in styrofoam cups. Owen Klein was already there, sitting at a corner table with a notebook open and a pen tapping rhythmically against the plastic surface. Owen was a local journalist who wrote mostly about city council meetings and zoning disputes, but he had the hungry eyes of someone who wanted to be breaking Watergate. We had met 2 years ago when he did a story on the supply chain issues affecting the local fisheries, and I had given him an anonymous tip that helped him connect the dots. He knew I was smarter than I looked, but he didn't know who I really was. You look like you swallowed a lemon, Owen said as I sat down. Family drama, I said. The usual. Ah, the mysterious prices. Owen scribbled something in the margin of his notebook. Speaking of which, your dad's foundation is popping up in some interesting chatter. I froze, my spoon halfway to my mouth. What kind of chatter? Owen leaned in, lowering his voice. Nothing printed yet, just rumors. But the Pricewell Civic Foundation is facing some quiet scrutiny. There are inconsistencies in their grant reporting. Big numbers that don't match the outcomes on the ground. Charles is obsessive about paperwork, I said. He wouldn't make a mistake. Not a mistake, Owen said. A fabrication. There is a rumor of a whistleblower. Someone inside the foundation who claims a failed community project in Ohio was written off as a success to secure federal matching funds. If that is true, it is fraud. Ohio? I frowned. The foundation doesn't operate in Ohio. That is what the website says, but the money trail says otherwise. Owen tapped his pen. If I were a betting man, I would say your dad is scrambling to cover something up before the fiscal year closes. Is that why he called you? Naomi's words echoed in my head. Someone is trying to patch a leak. He wants me to come to a fundraising weekend, I said. Optics. Human shield, Owen corrected. If he surrounds himself with family, he looks stable, trustworthy. It is the classic defense. Look at me. I am a family man. I couldn't possibly be embezzling funds. He isn't embezzling, I said reflexively. He is too proud to steal money. He cares about his reputation more than his bank account. Maybe, Owen said. But people do strange things when their legacy is threatened. Be careful, Gabriella. If things are crumbling, you don't want to be standing in the splash zone. I finished my chowder, but it tasted like ash. When I got home that evening, the invitation was waiting in my mailbox. It was heavy, cream-colored cardstock with the Pricewell Civic Foundation logo embossed in gold. The annual Hawthorne Hills Gala. It looked expensive. It looked respectable. Inside, there was a smaller envelope. I opened it and pulled out a handwritten note on personalized stationery. The handwriting was elegant, loopy, and unmistakably Elise's, Gabriella. Charles mentioned he spoke with you. We are so relieved you can make time in your schedule to join us. It has been too long. Please try to arrive by 4 on Friday so we can get you settled before the guests arrive. We want everything to be perfect. You should be grateful to be included. It is going to be a very important weekend for your sister. Best. Elise. I read the note twice, grateful to be included. It was a masterclass in passive aggression. It reminded me of my place, the outsider, the charity case, the one who should be thankful for the scraps from the table. I tossed the note on the kitchen counter and went to my bedroom to pack. I pulled a suitcase from the closet, the old battered one I used when I traveled for clerical training seminars. I was folding a gray cardigan when my phone buzzed. It wasn't a call. It wasn't a text. It was a notification from an encrypted messaging app I used for communicating with international clients who needed discretion. I rarely received messages on it that weren't scheduled business updates. I opened the app. The message was from a sender ID that was just a string of random alphanumeric characters. Subject: The Blue Heron. I stopped breathing. The Blue Heron. That wasn't a code name I used for business. That was the name of the bedtime story my mother used to tell me when I was 5 years old, before the divorce, before the cancer took her, before Charles erased her from the house. It was a story about a bird that stood so still the world forgot it was there. Until it struck. I opened the message. Do not trust the invitation. They are using you to validate the lie. Ask Charles about the Bracken Row document. Ask him why he sealed it the day she died. There was no signature. I sat down on the edge of my bed, the phone slippery in my hand. Bracken Row. I had never heard of it, but the reference to my mother, the day she died, sent a shockwave through me. Charles had always told me my mother was weak, that she had no head for business, that she was merely a socialite who crumbled under the pressure of his world. He had rewritten her history just as he had rewritten mine. Wasted potential, but someone knew otherwise. Someone knew enough to use the Blue Heron. I looked at the suitcase. 10 minutes ago. I was going to Hawthorne Hills to save my great-aunt's medical funding. I was going to endure the insults, eat the rubber chicken, and leave as soon as I could. Now. The landscape had shifted. I stood up and walked to the mirror. I looked at the woman reflected there. Brown hair pulled back in a severe bun. No makeup. A sweater that swallowed my frame. I looked harmless. I looked like the daughter Charles Price described. Uneducated. Worthless. Small. Good. If he wanted a prop, I would be the best prop he had ever seen. I would smile. I would nod. I would let Elise make her little digs and let Miranda shine her golden light. And while they were busy congratulating themselves on their benevolence, I would find out what Bracken Row was. I would find out why my mother's name was being whispered in encrypted channels. I typed a reply to the unknown number. I am listening. I hit send, then threw the phone into my bag. Naomi, I called out, walking back into the living room. Naomi looked up from her laptop. What? I need to borrow that dress, I said. The navy one, the one that makes me look like a librarian who just got fired. Naomi smirked. Going for the sympathy vote? No, I said. Camouflage. The drive to Hawthorne Hills on Friday took 3 hours. The traffic was heavy, a river of red taillights bleeding into the dusk. I drove in silence, rehearsing my lines. I am fine. Father, work is fine. Yes, the apartment is small, but it suits me. No, I am not dating anyone. The script was easy. I had been performing it for years. The challenge would be sticking to it when Charles started dissecting my life for sport. I pulled up to the gate of the Hawthorne Hills estate, just as the sun was dipping below the horizon. The guard checked my ID, his eyes lingering on my dented bumper with distinct disapproval, before waving me through. The house was massive. It was a sprawling colonial revival mansion with white pillars and manicured hedges that looked like they had been cut with a laser. The driveway was paved with crushed white stone that crunched loudly under my tires. I parked between a Mercedes SUV and a vintage Jaguar. My sedan looked like a dirty smudge on a pristine canvas. I took a breath, grabbed my bag, and walked to the front door. It opened before I could knock. Elise stood there, wearing a cashmere wrap that probably cost more than my car. She was 55, blonde, and maintained with a rigorous discipline that terrified me. Gabriella, she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. You made it. And in that car? Hello, Elise, I said. It runs? Well, Let's get you inside before the neighbors see, she said, ushering me into the foyer. Charles is in the library with the committee. Do not disturb him. Miranda is upstairs getting ready. We put you in the guest room above the garage. It is quiet there. We thought you would appreciate the privacy. The room above the garage. Not the guest wing, not the main house, the servants' quarters, essentially. That is fine, I said. Dinner is in an hour, Elise said, checking her watch. Please try to do something with your hair. We have the editor of the Standard coming, and we want to make a good impression. I will do my best. I carried my bag up the back stairs to the garage apartment. It was cold, smelling faintly of gasoline and old cedar. I set my bag down on the narrow bed and went to the window. From here, I could see the side of the main house. The library windows were lit. I could see figures moving inside. Charles was there, pacing, a glass of scotch in his hand. He looked agitated. He was gesturing at someone sitting in a leather chair, a man I didn't recognize, who had a briefcase at his feet. I watched them for a moment. Charles slammed his hand down on the desk. The other man didn't flinch. Naomi was right. He was pressed. I turned away from the window and opened my suitcase. I took out the navy dress. I took out the sensible heels. Then, from the hidden lining in the bottom of the suitcase, I took out a small, high-powered directional microphone I had purchased 2 years ago for a corporate espionage audit. I wasn't here to be the daughter. I wasn't here to be the victim. I walked back to the window. The glass was thin. If I cracked it open just an inch, and if the wind was right, I checked the time. 45 minutes until dinner. 45 minutes to be Gabriella. The failure. But for now, in the shadows of the garage, I was the anonymous benefactor. I was the supply chain expert. I was the blue heron. I set the microphone on the sill, put on my headphones, and waited for the static to clear. We cannot hide the report forever, Charles, a voice crackled in my ear. It was the man in the chair. If the girl finds out, Gabriella knows nothing, Charles's voice cut through, distorted but distinct. She is uneducated and worthless. She couldn't read a balance sheet if her life depended on it. She is not the threat. I am not talking about Gabriella, the man said. I am talking about the other one, the one who wrote the original draft. She is dead, Charles said. Dead women don't talk. I went cold. Her documents might, the man said. You should have burned them, Charles. Sealing them was a mistake. I needed the leverage, Charles hissed. Now, are we going to fix this grant report, or do I have to find a new compliance officer? I pulled the headphones off, my heart hammering against my ribs. Dead women don't talk. He was wrong. Dead women spoke all the time. They spoke in memories. They spoke in encrypted messages, and sometimes, if they were smart, they left a paper trail that could hang a king. I packed the microphone away. I changed into the navy dress. I pulled my hair back until my scalp ached. I looked in the mirror and practiced my vacuous, apologetic smile. I am so sorry I'm late, I whispered to the reflection. I got lost. I wasn't lost. For the first time in my life, I knew exactly where I was going. I turned off the light and walked toward the main house to join the family. The air in Hawthorne Hills was not breathable. It was a curated blend of ocean breeze, manicured jasmine, and the metallic tang of old money. I walked into the main hall of the Kendall house, which Charles had rented for the welcome reception, and felt the familiar weight of the atmosphere settle on my shoulders. It was a pressure change, like diving too deep too fast. The room was filled with people who had known me since I was a child, or rather, known the version of me Charles allowed them to see. They were the sort of people who shook hands with a firm, practiced grip while their eyes scanned the room for someone more important to talk to. I wore the navy dress. I kept my chin tucked slightly, my posture submissive, my hands clasped in front of me like a penitent schoolgirl. I was 33 years old, the owner of a logistics firm that moved freight across 3 continents. But in this room, I was Gabriella the disappointment. Gabriella! The voice belonged to Mrs. Sterling, a woman whose face was pulled so tight by surgery she looked permanently surprised. She drifted toward me, holding a champagne flute like a scepter. I did not think you were coming, she said, her eyes raking over my dress. Charles said you were between things. I am just taking some time, I said, my voice soft. It is good to see you, Mrs. Sterling. Well, she said, already looking past my shoulder. It is brave of you to show your face, after everything Charles has done for you. It must be hard, watching Miranda soar while you figure yourself out. Miranda is very talented, I said. She is a star, Mrs. Sterling agreed, turning her back to me as she spotted a senator's wife. Try the crab cakes, dear. They are free. I stood there, holding my clutch, letting the insult wash over me. It was a test. If I reacted, if I showed a spark of spine or intelligence, the narrative would shift. I would become difficult or unstable. But if I stayed quiet, if I let them treat me like a footnote, I remained invisible, and invisibility was the only way I was going to find the truth. I made my way to the bar and asked for a club soda with lime. I scanned the room. Charles was near the fireplace, holding court. He looked impeccable in a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. He was laughing, his head thrown back, his hand resting paternally on the shoulder of a young man I didn't recognize. Beside him stood Miranda. My half-sister looked radiant. She was wearing a silver gown that caught the light, her blonde hair cascading in perfect waves. She was smiling, nodding, playing the part of the dutiful daughter and the rising executive, but I saw the tension in her jaw. I saw the way her eyes darted to Charles every time he spoke, checking for approval, terrified of missing a cue. She wasn't soaring. She was treading water in a shark tank. Charles clinked a spoon against his glass. The room fell silent. The hum of conversation died instantly, replaced by the respectful attention that money always commands. Friends, colleagues, Charles began, his voice booming and warm. Thank you for joining us to kick off this weekend. The Pricewell Civic Foundation has always been about potential, about recognizing the promise in our community and nurturing it. He paused, letting the words land. He was a master of the pause. We have had a record year, he continued. New partnerships, new horizons, and I am so proud to have my family here with me. He gestured to Elise, who beamed. Then he gestured to Miranda. Miranda, who has been instrumental in our outreach program, a true credit to the name. Applause rippled through the room. Miranda flushed, looking down modestly. Then Charles turned his gaze to me. I was standing near a potted palm, trying to blend into the fronds. And Gabriella, he said. The tone shifted. It was subtle, a drop in pitch, a slight loosening of the warmth. My eldest, we are so glad she could take a break from finding herself to be here. A few people chuckled. It was a polite, cruel sound. Gabriella has always been a free spirit, Charles said, his smile tightening. She has never been one to finish things in the traditional sense, college, careers, but we love her for her journey. It is a good reminder that not everyone blooms in the same season or the same decade. The laughter was louder this time. He was framing me as a lovable failure, a perpetual adolescent. Welcome, Gabriella, he said, raising his glass. Enjoy the weekend. Try not to break anything. I forced a smile. I nodded. I let the humiliation burn in my chest, fueling the cold engine of my resolve. Laugh, Charles. I thought, enjoy the mic. You have no idea who is in the room. The toast ended, and the room broke into chatter again. I stayed by the palm tree, gripping my club soda. That was rough. I turned. Miranda was standing there. She looked genuinely pained, her brows drawn together, but there was something else in her eyes, a flicker of relief. As long as I was the failure, she was the success. My darkness made her light shine brighter. It is fine, I said. He is just being dad. I brought you something, Miranda said. She reached into her silver clutch and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I was looking at this the other day and thought of you. I know you said you were working in an office, but I thought, maybe it is time to try again? For real? I unfolded the paper. It was a brochure for the local community college in Meriton. Associate degrees for adult learners. She had circled a program in general studies. They have a great remedial math program, Miranda said, her voice dripping with helpfulness. I could pull some strings, get the application fee waived. I know money is tight for you. I looked at the brochure. I had a master's degree in logistics and supply chain management from a top-tier university, earned under my mother's maiden name. I had graduated summa cum laude. I could teach the professors at this community college how to restructure their departmental budgets. Thank you, Miranda, I said, tucking the brochure into my bag. That is very thoughtful. I just want you to have options, she said, touching my arm. It is hard watching you struggle. Dad worries. You know, he talks about it all the time, how you just drifted. I am managing, I said. Are you? She tilted her head. You look tired, Gabby, really tired. Maybe this weekend is a mistake. You don't have to stay for the gala on Sunday, if it is too much pressure. She wanted me gone. That was interesting. I think I will stay, I said. I am looking forward to the speeches. Miranda's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Suit yourself. Just try not to embarrass him. The board is on edge. Why? I asked innocently. Is something wrong? Miranda stiffened. No, nothing is wrong. It is just a big year. High stakes. She turned and walked away, her silver dress swishing around her ankles. I watched her go. She was terrified. I began to move through the room, not to mingle, but to observe. I had spent 10 years building a business on the principle that the truth is rarely in the paperwork. It is in the logistics. It is in the movement of goods, the delays, the unspoken bottlenecks. I watched the foundation staff. There were about a dozen of them here. Junior associates and senior directors. They were not drinking. They were huddled in tight knots, whispering. Every time Charles laughed across the room, they flinched. I saw Charles's personal assistant, a man named Marcus, who had the pale, pinched look of someone who slept 3 hours a night. He was standing near the service entrance, clutching a black leather briefcase against his chest like a shield. He wasn't checking his phone. He wasn't looking at the guests. He was staring at the exit. A board member, a heavy-set man named Harlan Wexford, walked past Marcus. He didn't say hello. He just tapped the briefcase with his index finger. 2 sharp taps, and gave Marcus a look that could have curdled milk. Marcus nodded, swallowing hard. That briefcase was not full of pamphlets. I needed to get closer to the staff. I scanned the faces and spotted Lena Hart. Lena had been an intern when I was in high school, back before the divorce. She had been kind to me then, sneaking me sodas from the break room when Charles was on a rampage. Now she was older, wearing a tailored suit that looked a few years out of date. Her hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. She was standing by the buffet, arranging cheese on a cracker with the intense focus of someone trying to avoid eye contact with everyone in the room. I sidled up to her. The brie is terrible, I said quietly. Go for the aged cheddar. Lena jumped, nearly dropping the cracker. She looked at me, her eyes widening. Gabriella? Hi, Lena? My God, she exhaled, checking over her shoulder. I heard you were coming. I didn't believe it. Why not? Because, she lowered her voice to a whisper. Because this place is a burning building right now. If I were you, I would be halfway to Canada. Charles says it is a record year, I said, picking up a grape. Charles says a lot of things, Lena muttered. She looked at me, really looked at me, and her expression softened. I saw what he did during the toast. He hasn't changed. No, I said. He hasn't. But you look stressed, Lena. More than usual. Lena glanced toward Charles. He was busy charming a donor's wife. She took a step closer to me, turning her back to the room so we looked like 2 old friends catching up. It is the reporting, she whispered. The grant for the Ohio Initiative. The numbers don't add up. We sent the preliminary data to the compliance officer 3 weeks ago, and he kicked it back. He said the outcomes were statistically impossible. And what did Charles do? He fired the compliance officer, Lena said, her voice trembling. And he took the files. Marcus has the only physical copies in that briefcase. We are supposed to present the final report to the board on Monday, if those numbers are still in there. It is fraud. Gabriella, federal fraud. Why is he doing it? I asked. He has enough money. He doesn't need to lie for grants. It isn't about the money, Lena said. It is about the credit, the program. It is huge. It is going to be the model for national policy. If it succeeds, Charles gets a medal. If it fails, he looks incompetent. He can't handle incompetent. Gabriella. Elise's voice cut through the air like a whip. I pulled away from Lena instantly. Elise was standing 10 feet away, smiling, but her eyes were hard. Stop bothering the staff, darling, Elise said. Lena is working. Come, I want you to meet the mayor. I gave Lena a quick, significant look. Thank you. I followed Elise, playing the part of the chastised daughter. But my mind was racing. A missing report, a fired compliance officer, a briefcase that Marcus was guarding with his life. I spent the next hour shaking hands and being patronized. The mayor asked if I was still finding myself. I told him I was considering a career in dog walking. He laughed and patted my cheek. At 10 o'clock, the party began to wind down. I used the distraction of the valet line to slip away. I didn't go to the garage apartment. I went back into the main house, moving through the servants' corridors I had memorized as a child. I needed to see Charles's office. The library was empty. The air smelled of cigar smoke and expensive scotch. I closed the door softly behind me and didn't turn on the light. Letting the moonlight from the tall windows guide me, I walked to the massive mahogany desk. It was clear, terrifyingly neat. Charles didn't leave clutter. I checked the drawers, locked. I looked at the bookshelves, rows of leather-bound volumes that had never been read. Photos were arranged on the mantel. Charles shaking hands with the president, Charles cutting a ribbon, Charles and Miranda skiing in Aspen, and there, tucked in the back, almost hidden by a trophy, was a small silver frame. I picked it up. It was a photo of my mother. She was standing at a podium, mid-speech. She looked fierce, beautiful. Her hair was windblown, and she was wearing a simple gray suit. Behind her, a banner read, Pricewell Civic Foundation, Inaugural Strategy Summit. I stared at the photo. Charles had always told me my mother never cared about the foundation. He said she found the work boring, that she refused to attend events, that she was too fragile for the realities of philanthropy. She never contributed anything. He had said, she just spent the money. But in this photo, she wasn't spending money. She was leading. She was commanding the room. I turned the frame over. There was a date stamped on the back of the photo paper. October 14, 1996. I did the math. 1996. I was 3 years old. The foundation was officially launched in 1998. My mother was leading a strategy summit 2 years before the foundation supposedly existed. You are a liar, Charles, I whispered to the empty room. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I froze. Had I triggered a silent alarm? I pulled it out. It was the encrypted app. Another message from the unknown sender. Subject: the architect. He didn't just steal the money. He stole the blueprint, if you want the truth about your mother's work. Check the archived minutes from the Bracken Row meeting. They never digitized them. Basement storage. Row 4. Box 19. I looked at the message. Then at the photo of my mother. The sender knew where I was. They knew I was looking. I put the photo back exactly where I found it. I slipped out of the library and headed for the basement stairs. The basement of Kendall House was a labyrinth of stone corridors and old wine cellars. The foundation used the back rooms for long-term record storage. It was cold down there, the air heavy with dust and damp. I used the flashlight on my phone. The shadows danced against the stone walls, looking like grasping hands. Row 4. I found the metal shelving units. They were packed with cardboard banker's boxes, labeled with years and project codes. Box 19. I counted down the row. Box 19 was on the bottom shelf, wedged under a rusted pipe. It was labeled Internal Governance, Pre-Launch, 1995 to 1997. I pulled the box out. It scraped against the concrete floor, a harsh sound in the silence. I sat cross-legged on the cold floor and opened the lid. The smell of old paper wafted up. Inside were manila folders, brittle with age. I thumbed through them. Budget proposals, site selection, catering estimates. Then I found it. A thin red folder labeled Bracken Row Strategy Meeting. Minutes. I opened it. The minutes were typed on a typewriter. The ink faded to gray. Date, November 2nd, 1996. Attendees, Charles Price, Sylvia Rowan, Arthur Pym, and Eleanor Price, my mother. I scanned the document. It was a summary of a meeting to define the core mission of the new foundation. Item 3. Proposal for Adult Education Initiatives. Speaker, Eleanor Price. My heart hammered against my ribs. I read the summary of her proposal. Mrs. Price presented a framework for a legacy loop system, focusing on non-traditional supply chain logic applied to human capital. The proposal suggests funding logistics support, childcare, transportation, rather than just tuition, to ensure completion rates. I stopped breathing. The Legacy Loop. That was the name of the flagship program Charles was launching this weekend, the one he was taking credit for, the one everyone said was revolutionary. I turned the page. There was a diagram attached. It was a hand-drawn flowchart of the system. I recognized the handwriting instantly, the sharp, slanted loops, the way the T's were crossed with a fierce slash. It was my mother's handwriting, and at the bottom of the page, in bold ink, she had written, Draft 1. Author, Eleanor Price. Do not distribute without permission. I sat there in the dark basement, the paper trembling in my hands. Charles hadn't just erased her. He had looted her. He had called her worthless. He had called her uneducated. He had told the world she was a burden. And all the while, he had been building his empire on the intellectual property she created before she died. He had stolen her mind, and now, 30 years later, he was doing the same thing to me, calling me worthless while I secretly built the exact kind of systems my mother had dreamed of. I wasn't just her daughter. I was her proof. I took my phone and photographed every page of the minutes. The flash was blinding in the dark. Click, click, click. I put the folder back in the box. I shoved the box back under the shelf. I stood up, dusting the dirt off my navy dress. I wasn't afraid of the dinner anymore. I wasn't afraid of the briefcase or the staff or Miranda's pity. I felt a cold, clear calm settle over me. It was the calm of a sniper adjusting the scope. Charles wanted a prop? Fine, I would be a prop. I would be the quiet, uneducated daughter standing in the corner. But inside, I was already writing the indictment. I walked back up the stairs, leaving the ghost of my mother in the dark, and stepped back into the light of the house that theft built. As I reached the top of the stairs, my phone buzzed again, a text from Owen Klein. I dug into the Ohio rumor. It is worse than we thought. The whistleblower isn't just claiming fraud. He is claiming Charles is selling the program methodology to a private equity firm, if he sells it. The copyright gets locked down. If your mom wrote it, he is selling her ghost. I stared at the screen. He wasn't just stealing her credit. He was selling her soul for profit. I put the phone away. I walked out the back door and across the crushed stone driveway to the garage apartment. The night air was cold, but I didn't feel it. I looked up at the main house. I saw Charles in the window of the library, pouring himself another drink. He looked powerful. He looked untouchable. Enjoy it. Dad, I thought, drink up. Because I knew who I was now. I wasn't the failure. I was the repo man. And I was coming to take it all back. The Saturday morning sun over Hawthorne Hills was deceptive. It looked bright and cleansing, hitting the manicured lawns with a cheerful intensity, but it did nothing to burn off the fog of dread that had settled in my chest. I had slept 3 hours, my dreams haunted by the image of my mother's signature on a document hidden in a basement box. I needed verification. A signature was proof of presence, But it wasn't proof of intent. For that, I needed a witness. I had found Dr. Sylvia Rowan's contact information in an old university directory I accessed through my phone's browser at 2 a.m. She was listed as faculty emeritus at Eldon Ridge, but her home address was a modest cottage in a town called Oakhaven, only 30 minutes inland. Sylvia had been in that meeting in 1996. She had been the only other woman in the room. I told Elise I was going for a drive to clear my head, a euphemism she accepted with a pitying nod. As if my head were a cluttered closet, I was too incompetent to organize. Oakhaven was less precious than Hawthorne Hills. The trees were older. The houses sat further back from the road, and the air smelled of pine needles rather than money. I found Sylvia's cottage at the end of a dirt driveway. It was small, surrounded by a garden that was riotous and overgrown, a sharp contrast to the geometric precision of the Price estate. Sylvia was in the garden, wearing heavy canvas gloves and wrestling with a rosebush. She looked to be in her late 70s, her hair a shock of white cropped close to her skull. She didn't look frail. She looked like she could snap a root in half with her bare hands. I parked the car and walked to the gate. "Dr. Rowan?" I called out. She stopped, wiping her brow with the back of her wrist. She squinted at me, her eyes sharp and blue behind wire-rimmed glasses. She didn't smile. She studied me like a specimen under a slide. "You have her chin," she said flatly. "And her walk. You walk like you are apologizing for taking up space." I stopped, my hand on the latch. "You know who I am?" "I know who you look like," Sylvia said, peeling off her gloves. "You are Eleanor's girl, Gabriella. I wondered how long it would take you to find me." "I found the minutes," I said. "From 1996, the Bracken Row meeting." Sylvia let out a short, bark-like laugh. "Bracken Row. God, that damp little basement. Charles hated it. He thought genius required mahogany tables. Your mother knew genius could happen on a folding chair." She gestured for me to come in. We sat on a weathered wooden bench near a patch of thyme. Sylvia didn't offer me tea. She offered me attention, which was far more valuable. "Charles says she never contributed," I said, my voice steady. "He says she was a socialite who couldn't handle the work. He says the foundation is his creation entirely. Charles says the sun rises because he gave it permission," Sylvia said. She leaned forward, her elbows on her knees. "Your mother wasn't just a contributor, Gabriella. She was the architect, the entire model, the legacy loop, the idea of treating human capital like a supply chain, identifying the bottlenecks in poverty and removing them. That was her brain. She wrote the white paper in 3 weeks. I saw her do it. She was brilliant. She saw patterns where other people just saw chaos." "So why did she leave?" I asked. "Why did she let him take it?" "She didn't let him," Sylvia said, her voice hardening. "He pushed her out, systematically. He gaslit her. He told the board she was unstable. He used her postpartum depression against her. He made her question her own memory. And then, when she was weak, he brought in the lawyers." I felt a cold stone form in my stomach. "Theft." "Erasure," Sylvia corrected. "It is more violent than theft. Theft implies you take something and run. Erasure means you stay and pretend it was yours all along. He told her if she fought him, he would bury her in legal fees and take full custody of you. He told her she would never see you again." I stared at the thyme growing between the paving stones. He had held me hostage before I could even speak. "But Eleanor was not stupid," Sylvia continued. "She knew she couldn't win the war then, so she planted a minefield for the future." "The sealed document," I whispered. Sylvia nodded. She insisted on a clause in the original charter. Legal protections for future beneficiaries. It sounded vague enough that Charles signed it, thinking it meant tax shelters. But she left a specific instruction with the firm that held the original copyright. The authorship statement was to be released only when her daughter, you, were old enough to understand the value of intellectual property. Or when the foundation attempted to commercialize the methodology. My head snapped up. Commercialize it? "Selling it," Sylvia said. Franchising the model. If the Pricewell Civic Foundation ever tried to sell the Legacy Loop as a proprietary product, the authorship claim triggers. Eleanor wanted to make sure he couldn't profit from her ghost. He is trying to sell it now, I said. That is why the report is being altered. He needs the numbers to look perfect for a buyer. Sylvia sat back, a grim satisfaction on her face. Then the minefield is active, but be careful. Gabriella, Charles has spent 30 years building a fortress around that lie. If you pull the thread, the whole thing comes down, and he will not go quietly. I don't want him to go quietly, I said. I want him to answer. Good, Sylvia said. Your mother would have liked that. She always said you were the one thing she got to keep, the one thing he couldn't edit. I drove back to Hawthorne Hills with Sylvia's words ringing in my ears. The one thing he couldn't edit. But he had tried. He had tried to edit me into a failure. A cautionary tale. When I arrived back at the estate, the lunch preparation was in full swing. Caterers were carrying trays of salmon and asparagus across the lawn. I found Elise on the terrace, supervising the placement of floral arrangements. She looked impeccable in a cream linen suit, but her hands were fluttering nervously. Gabriella, she said, spotting me. You missed the florists. I had to make a command decision on the hydrangeas. I hope you approve. The flowers are lovely. Elise, I said, walking up to her. I kept my voice soft, non-threatening. I was still the prop. You always make everything look effortless, Elise sighed, a sound of genuine fatigue. Effortless. If only people knew. Charles is in a mood today. He has been on the phone with the lawyers all morning. Something about a leak. Is everything okay? I asked, picking up a linen napkin and folding it idly. He seemed so confident last night. He is confident, Elise said quickly. It is just complicated. The foundation has grown so much. There are so many moving parts now. Sometimes I wonder if we grew too fast. It must have been hard in the beginning, I said. Getting the funding. I know Charles put everything he had into it. Elise let out a small, sharp laugh. Charles? Oh, honey. Charles didn't have the capital to launch something like this. Not back then. The market had just crashed. We were leveraging everything. I paused, my fingers still on the napkin. Then how did he do it? The initial endowment was massive. Elise froze. She looked at me, her eyes widening slightly, as if she realized she had said too much. She glanced around the terrace to make sure the caterers were out of earshot. We had help, she said vaguely. Silent partners, people who believed in the vision. That was lucky, I probed gently, to find people with that kind of money who didn't want credit. It wasn't luck, Elise snapped, her voice dropping to a whisper. It was necessity. Charles was desperate. He took money from sources that required total anonymity, because if their names were attached, the banks wouldn't touch us. What kind of sources? The kind you don't ask questions about, Elise said, her face pale. Charles did what he had to do to secure our future. He was terrified the wrong people would find out where the seed money came from. He still is. That is why he is so paranoid about this audit. If they dig too deep into the 1998 financials, they might find the shell companies. She stopped, putting a hand to her throat. Why am I telling you this? I am just tired. Ignore me. Gabriella, it is just stress. Of course, I said, touching her arm. I didn't hear a thing, but I had heard everything. Charles hadn't just stolen the idea. He had funded it with dirty money. He was laundering his reputation with a foundation built on theft and shadow capital. That evening, the house was full of noise and music, but I felt like a ghost moving through the walls. I avoided Charles. I avoided the guests. I spent the hours between dinner and midnight in the library, pretending to read, but actually watching the hallway. I saw Marcus, the assistant, leave the foundation laptop on a side table while he ran to fetch Charles a fresh drink. It was reckless. It was a mistake born of exhaustion. Marcus had been running for 16 hours straight. I moved. I sat in the chair next to the table, opened the laptop, and typed in the password. I had seen Marcus type it earlier that day. Pricewell 2026. Not exactly Fort Knox. I didn't have much time. I navigated to the shared drive. I found the folder marked Executive Summary, Legacy Loop. Inside, there was a subfolder with a small padlock icon next to it. Legacy Drafts. Do not delete. I clicked on it. It asked for a second password. I stared at the screen. What would Charles use to lock away the past? What was the one thing he couldn't let go of? I tried success. Incorrect. I tried Harvard. Incorrect. I tried Eleanor. Incorrect. I closed my eyes. I thought about the man who measured love in accolades. The man who needed to be the first, the best, the only. I typed. Founder. The folder opened. My breath hitched. There were dozens of files. Draft 1.0, 1996. Draft 1.2, 1997. I opened the first one. The metadata showed the author, Eleanor Price. The text was vibrant, filled with her voice. She used metaphors about rivers and currents. She wrote with empathy. I opened Draft 4.0, 1999. The author metadata had been changed to Charles Price. The text was different. The metaphors were gone. The empathy was scrubbed out, replaced with corporate buzzwords and dry statistics. He had taken her poetry and turned it into a manual. He had sterilized her genius so he could claim it. I plugged in my flash drive. I copied the folder. The progress bar crawled across the screen. 20%, 50%. Gabriella? I slammed the laptop shut and yanked the drive out, hiding it in my palm. Miranda was standing in the doorway. She was wearing silk pajamas and a plush robe, holding a mug of tea. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, and she looked younger, vulnerable. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Just checking my email," I lied, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Marcus left his computer here. I didn't want to wake anyone up by using the business center." Miranda walked into the room. She didn't look at the computer. She looked at me, and then she slumped onto the sofa opposite me. She curled her legs under her, looking small. "I can't sleep," she said. "Pre-gala jitters?" I asked, slipping the flash drive into my pocket. "No," Miranda whispered. "Panic. Sheer, unadulterated panic." She looked up at me, her eyes swimming with tears. "I don't know how to do this, Gabby. I don't know how to be what he wants. He rewrites everything I do. I spent 3 months on the outreach proposal, and he tore it apart in 10 minutes. He said I sounded soft. He said I sounded like our mother?" I offered. Miranda flinched. "He said I sounded like an amateur. He wants me to present the data tomorrow, but the numbers keep changing. He gives me new spreadsheets every hour. I don't even know what is real anymore." I looked at my sister. For years, I had resented her. I had seen her as the usurper, the golden child who got the love I was denied. But looking at her now, shaking in her silk robe, I realized she wasn't a usurper. She was a prisoner. Charles hadn't loved her. He had consumed her. He had taken her potential and crushed it into a shape that flattered him. "You are not an amateur, Miranda," I said softly. "You are exhausted, and you are being gaslit." "I just want to go home," she confessed, a tear sliding down her cheek. "I hate this house. I hate the foundation. I want to open a bakery. Did you know that? I love baking. But Charles says it is domestic and below our station." "Baking is chemistry," I said. "It is precise. It is difficult." "He scares me," she whispered. "When he gets quiet, when he looks at you like you are a bad investment." I moved to the sofa and sat beside her. I didn't hug her. We weren't there yet. But I put a hand on her knee. "You don't have to be his soldier," I said. "You can walk away." "I can't," she said. "He controls my trust fund. He controls my reputation. If I leave, he will destroy me. Just like he—" She stopped. She looked at me, realization dawning in her eyes. "Just like he destroyed me," I finished. Miranda nodded slowly. "I used to think you were the lucky one," she said, "because you got out." I didn't get out, I said. I was thrown out. But you are right. It was luck. We sat there in silence for a moment, the clock ticking on the mantel. I had the evidence in my pocket that could burn her world down. I had the proof that her father was a fraud and her career was built on lies. If I exposed Charles, Miranda would be collateral damage. The press would eat her alive. She would be the daughter of the fraudster, the accomplice. I couldn't do that, not to the woman who just wanted to open a bakery. Go to bed, Miranda, I said gently. Get some sleep. Tomorrow is just a day. It is not a verdict. She stood up, wiping her eyes. Thanks, Gabby. You are nicer than he says you are. I am exactly who I am, I said. She left the room. I sat there, touching the flash drive in my pocket. My internal conflict was a physical ache. I had the weapon, but I couldn't fire it without hitting the hostage. I needed a sniper rifle, not a bomb. The next morning, Owen Klein texted me a location. Meet Marceline, the coffee press on Main. Back booth, 10 a.m. I told Elise I was going to buy nylons. The lies were coming easier now. Marceline Shore was a woman who looked like she was carved out of granite. She wore a sharp gray suit and had a stillness about her that commanded respect. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. Owen briefed me, she said as I slid into the booth. You have the minutes? I have photos, I said. And I have digital files showing the document evolution. Original author Eleanor Price, edited by Charles Price. I showed her the phone. Marceline scrolled through the images, her face impassive. This is substantial, she said. If the Foundation is attempting to sell the methodology or claim exclusive copyright for a commercial partnership, this is actionable. It is fraud. It is intellectual property theft. And if the financials from the 90s are as shaky as you suspect, it is RICO territory. I don't want to destroy the Foundation, I said. There are good people working there, staff who believe in the mission, beneficiaries who need the grants. My sister works there. Marceline looked at me over the top of her glasses. You want to perform surgery with a sledgehammer, Ms. Price. If we file a lawsuit, it becomes public record. The scandal will vaporize the Foundation's credibility. There has to be another way, I said. I want Charles removed. I want the history corrected. I want my mother's name on the work. But I want the work to continue. You want a boardroom coup, Marceline said. You don't want a lawsuit. You want leverage. You want to present this evidence to the board of directors before the gala. Force them to remove him quietly to save the institution. Can we do that? We can, Marceline said. But you need to be precise. You need to verify the alteration of the current grant report. If you can prove he is lying right now, not just 30 years ago, the board will have to act. Liability insurance won't cover active fraud. I can prove it, I said. I just need one more document. Get it, Marceline said. And Gabriella? Once you pull this trigger, there is no going back. He will come for you with everything he has. He has nothing I want, I said. I returned to the estate just after noon. Charles was waiting for me in the foyer. He didn't look like the charming host anymore. He looked like a wolf who had smelled an intruder in his den. His face was flushed, his eyes hard. Where have you been? He demanded. Errands, I said. Do not lie to me. He stepped closer. Invading my personal space. Marcus tells me someone accessed the laptop last night. Someone was poking around in files that do not concern them. Maybe Marcus should use a stronger password, I said coolly. Charles grabbed my arm. His grip was painful. You think you are clever? You think because you found some old papers you can threaten me? I haven't threatened anyone. Charles, you are a gnat, he sneered, his spit landing near my cheek. You are a small, insignificant little girl who couldn't cut it in the real world. So you come back here trying to tear down what I built. You are too soft to matter. Gabriella, you always were. You don't have the stomach for this. Let go of my arm. I will cut you off, he hissed. I will make sure you never see a dime of the inheritance. I will write you out of the will today. You will die penniless in that miserable apartment. I never asked for your money, I said, looking him dead in the eye. And I don't need your will. I have my own, he laughed, a cruel, barking sound. Your own? What do you have? A clerical job? A leased car? You are nothing without the name I gave you. I am everything without it, I said. I pulled my arm free. He looked surprised by my strength. I turned and walked up the stairs. Not looking back. I didn't run. I walked. But the moment I closed the door to the garage apartment, the adrenaline crashed. I slid down the door until I hit the floor. I pulled my knees to my chest. I didn't cry because I was afraid of him. I wasn't. He was a small man standing on a pile of stolen paper. I cried because for 33 years, I had let that voice live in my head. I had let him convince me that I was the broken one. I had let him define my worth. I grieved for the girl I had been. The girl who tried so hard to please a man who was incapable of seeing her. I grieved for my mother, who had died believing she had failed. I sat there for 20 minutes, letting the tears come, hot and fast. Then, I wiped my face. I stood up. I went to the sink and splashed cold water on my eyes. He said I was too soft. He said I didn't have the stomach for it. He was wrong. I didn't have the stomach for cruelty. I didn't have the stomach for his kind of war, the kind that burned everything down. I had the stomach for justice. I opened my suitcase. I took out the flash drive. I took out the photos of the minutes. I took out the folder I had prepared with Marceline's help. I wasn't going to scream at him. I wasn't going to make a scene at dinner. I was going to wait for the moment when he felt safest. I was going to wait for the spotlight. And then, I was going to tell the truth. I sat at the small desk in the garage apartment and began to organize the documents. Exhibit A, Exhibit B, Exhibit C. The plan formed in my mind. Crystal clear. It required timing. It required restraint. It required me to stand on a stage and be Gabriella Price. Not the daughter, but the unexpected variable. I would not use insults. I would use dates. I would use metadata. I would use his own arrogance against him. I looked out the window. The sun was setting over Hawthorne Hills, casting long shadows across the lawn. The gala was tomorrow. Checkmate, Dad, I whispered. The wind off the Atlantic had picked up, rattling the loose pane in the garage apartment window. It was a restless, agitation sound that matched the hum of anxiety under my skin. I had the documents from the basement, but I needed the context. I needed the human element that turned a paperwork error into a crime. I met Ethan Briggs in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner 3 miles down the coast from Hawthorne Hills. It was the kind of place where fishermen stopped for coffee before dawn. A neutral ground where a price would never be seen. Ethan was younger than I expected, maybe 28, sitting in a Corolla with the engine running and the heat blasting. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. When I tapped on the glass, he jumped so hard he dropped his phone. I signaled for him to unlock the door. I slid into the passenger seat. The car smelled of stale coffee and fear. "You are Gabriella," he said. It wasn't a question. He was staring at my hands, checking to see if I was holding a recording device. "I am," I said. "Owen Klein said you wanted to talk. He said you were tired of being stonewalled." "Stonewalled is a polite word for it," Ethan said, rubbing his face. "I was threatened. Ms. Price, your father's head of security told me that if I didn't sign off on the audit, I would never work in compliance again. He said he would flag me as a security risk." "Charles plays hard," I said. "But you didn't sign it." "I couldn't," Ethan said. He reached into the back seat and pulled out a laptop bag. "I am an accountant, not a creative writer. The numbers didn't exist." He opened a folder on his lap and handed me a stack of spreadsheets. They were dense, filled with rows of data regarding the Ohio Initiative, the pilot program Charles was touting as the Foundation's crown jewel. "Look at column D," Ethan said, pointing with a shaking finger. "This is the raw data from the field. Completion rates for the adult education grants, 32%. It is a hard program. People drop out. Life gets in the way. That is normal. 32%. I repeated. Now look at the report Charles presented to the donor circle last month, Ethan said, flipping the page. 85%. I stared at the number. It wasn't an adjustment. It was a fantasy. He didn't just round up, Ethan said, his voice rising. He invented graduates. He created 500 people out of thin air to justify the next round of funding. If the federal grant comes through based on these numbers, it is grand larceny. It is prison time. Why? I asked. Why lie? The foundation has money. Not for this, Ethan said. The foundation has assets, but they are tied up in endowments. They are liquidity poor. And this program, Charles promised the board a miracle. He promised a self-sustaining model that would attract private equity. He sold them a product that works 80% of the time. If he admits it only works 30% of the time, the buyers walk away, and the foundation takes a $50 million write-down. He is selling the methodology, I said, realizing the scope of it. He is franchising the lie. And he is burying the original data, Ethan said. He deleted the server logs. He wiped the field reports. He thinks because he controls the IT department, he controls the truth. But I kept a backup. He handed me a flash drive. It was small, black, innocuous. This contains the original field reports, Ethan said. Metadata intact. It proves the numbers were altered on the night of September 12th by a user with administrator privileges. Thank you, Ethan, I said, closing my hand around the drive. Don't thank me, he said, looking out the windshield at the gray ocean. Just use it, and keep my name out of it until you have him dead to rights. I have a mortgage. I promise, I said. I got out of the car. Ethan didn't wait. He threw the Corolla into reverse and peeled out of the lot, desperate to be anywhere else. I drove back to the estate. My mind racing. I had the what? The stolen intellectual property from my mother. Now I had the now. The active fraud. I needed to verify the metadata. I needed to be sure that the digital fingerprints pointed to Charles, not some fall guy he had set up. I went straight to the garage apartment. I locked the door and pulled down the shades. I booted up my laptop, the high-performance machine I used for my logistics firm, not the burner I had borrowed from Marcus. I plugged in Ethan's drive. Then I opened an encrypted chat window. Gabriella, are you awake? Naomi, it is Saturday. I am watching cartoons. What do you need? Gabriella, I need you to run a forensic check on a batch of Excel files. I need to know if the modification timestamps match the server logs I'm about to send you. Naomi, sending now. And Gabby, be careful. You are pinging off a tower in Hawthorne Hills. If they have a security net, they can see the traffic. Gabriella, I am routing through my VPN. Just check the files. I uploaded the data. While Naomi worked, I sat on the edge of the bed, my heart thudding. I was crossing a line. I wasn't just a daughter asking questions anymore. I was an investigator building a case. 10 minutes later, Naomi replied, Naomi, confirmed. The files were modified on September 12th at 11:45 p.m. The user ID is CP_admin. But here's the kicker. The IP address for the modification isn't the foundation office. It is the residential IP for the main house at Hawthorne Hills. Charles had cooked the books from his own library. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. He had done it himself. His arrogance was so absolute that he didn't even bother to hide his tracks. Believing no one would ever dare to audit him. Got you, I whispered. The door to the apartment rattled. I slammed the laptop shut and shoved it under a pillow. I stood up just as the door opened. Miranda stood there. She looked frazzled, still wearing the clothes she had on at breakfast, her hair pulled back in a messy knot. You locked the door, she said, accusingly. I was changing, I lied. Miranda stepped into the room. She looked around, her eyes landing on the pillow where the edge of the laptop was barely visible. She wasn't stupid. She knew I didn't bring a computer like that to check my horoscope. What are you doing, Gabriella? She asked, her voice trembling. I saw you last night in the library. I saw you with the flash drive. And now you are hiding in here with a laptop. I am working, I said. You are not working, Miranda snapped. You are digging. You are trying to find something to hurt him. Why? Because he didn't pay enough attention to you? Because he cut you off? It has nothing to do with money, I said calmly. It is sabotage, Miranda shouted, tears springing to her eyes. This is the biggest weekend of my life. The foundation is my career. Gabby, if you blow this up, you are not just hurting him, you are hurting me. You are destroying everything I have worked for. I am trying to save you from going down with the ship, I said. Miranda, listen to me. The foundation is lying. The numbers for the Ohio project are fake. Stop it. She covered her ears like a child. I don't want to hear it. You are jealous. You have always been jealous. I have proof, I said. I reached for the pillow. Let me show you. One file. Just look at one file. No. She backed away toward the door. I am telling him. I am telling Charles that you are spying on us. If you tell him, I said, my voice low and hard, he will make you complicit. He will ask you to lie for him. He will put you in front of the board and make you swear the numbers are real. And when the truth comes out, and it will come out, Miranda, you will be the one facing the charges, not him. Because he will say, it was your department. Miranda froze, her hand on the doorknob. The color drained from her face. He wouldn't, she whispered. He loves me. He loves the reflection of himself he sees in you, I said. Don't let him break the mirror. Miranda, look at the file. She stared at me for a long, agonizing second. Then she shook her head violently. You are crazy, she said. You are just like he says, unstable. She turned and ran out of the room, leaving the door wide open. I stood there, listening to her footsteps fade on the gravel. She hadn't said she would tell him. She had just run. She was wavering. I couldn't stay in the apartment. The walls felt like they were closing in. I needed to move. I needed to complete the final piece of the puzzle. I got in my car and drove into town, to the First National Bank on Main Street. My mother had opened a safety deposit box there 35 years ago. It was one of the few things Charles hadn't been able to touch because it was in her maiden name, and the access key had been mailed to her sister, my great-aunt Maeve, who had kept it in a tin of buttons for 3 decades before giving it to me on my 30th birthday. She said you would know when to open it, Maeve had said. I hadn't known then. I knew now. The bank vault was cool and silent. The clerk left me alone in a small viewing room with the metal box. I opened it. It wasn't full of jewelry or cash. It contained a single thick envelope sealed with wax. For Gabriella. My hands shook as I broke the seal. Inside was a letter, handwritten on heavy paper, and a sheaf of legal documents. I read the letter first. My darling Gabriella, if you are reading this, it means you have found your own way. I am sorry I could not be there to see it. I am sorry I had to leave you in a house that did not know how to love you. Charles will try to tell you that I was weak. He will tell you I had no head for business. Do not believe him. I was not weak. I was outmaneuvered. I wrote the work he claims is his. I built the engine he drives. But I did not stop writing when I left the board. I continued to work. I published my research on supply chain human capital under a name he would never look for. A. Pierce. The enclosed documents prove that A. Pierce is Eleanor Price. They prove that the methodology belongs to me, and by extension, to you. Use them not for revenge, but for reclamation. Do not let him erase us. I love you. More than there are numbers to count. Mom. I pressed the letter to my chest, closing my eyes against the sting of tears. A. Pierce. I looked at the legal documents. They were notarized affidavits, linking Eleanor Price to the pseudonym A. Pierce, along with copyright filings dated 1999, 2 years after she was supposedly too fragile to work. She had beaten him from the grave. She had created a parallel identity, just like I had. We were mirrors of each other. Women forced to hide our brilliance to survive a man who needed to be the sun. I put the documents in my bag. I had the weapon. Now I just had to survive the dinner. I called Sylvia Rowan from the car. Pierce, I said when she answered. Ah, Sylvia said, her voice warm with recognition. You found it. Why didn't you tell me? Because Eleanor asked me not to, Sylvia said. She wanted you to find it yourself. She wanted you to know that the instinct to hide, to protect your work, wasn't cowardice. It was strategy. She was a Pierce. She wrote 3 textbooks under that name. They are standard reading in sociology programs across the country. Charles doesn't know? Charles doesn't read sociology, Sylvia said dryly. He reads Forbes. He has no idea. If you drop that name in front of the board, it will be like dropping a grenade. Thank you, Sylvia. Give him hell. Gabriella. The donor dinner that night was held in the conservatory, a glass-walled room filled with orchids and candlelight. It was intimate. Only 20 people. The highest tier of donors. The ones who wrote checks with 6 zeros. I wore the navy dress again. I had no other options. And frankly, I didn't care. I felt armored in the truth. The mood was tense. The rumors Owen had mentioned were beginning to circulate among the guests. I saw heads leaning together, whispers exchanged behind napkins. Charles was working the room frantically, his laughter too loud, his smile too wide. We sat down to eat. I was placed at the far end of the table, next to a deaf chemist who seemed perfectly happy to ignore me, halfway through the main course. Harlan Wexford spoke up. Harlan was the chairman of the board, a man with a face like a bulldog and a wallet to match. He put down his fork and looked down the table at Charles. Charles, Harlan rumbled. The table went silent. I was looking at the prospectus for the university partnership. There are some discrepancies in the timelines. Charles didn't miss a beat. Minor clerical errors. Harlan, we are correcting them as we speak. They don't look like clerical errors, Harlan said, his eyes narrowing. They look like structural flaws, and I am hearing chatter about the Ohio numbers. People are saying the completion rates are inflated. Charles's smile froze. He glanced around the table. He needed an out. He needed a distraction. His eyes landed on me. Harlan, please, Charles said, his voice dropping to a tone of conspiratorial intimacy. We can discuss the details in private. We have had some internal challenges, staffing issues, disorganization. Disorganization doesn't account for a 50% delta, Harlan pressed. It does when you have people involved who aren't entirely reliable, Charles said. He gestured vaguely toward me. My daughter, Gabriella, has been helping out in the office recently, trying to get back on her feet. Every head turned to look at me. She means well, Charles continued, his voice dripping with faux paternal concern. But she struggles with details. Sometimes she gets confused. We are reviewing everything she touched. The room went deadly quiet. He was doing it. He was setting me up as the scapegoat. He was planting the seed that the errors were the result of my incompetence, my instability. I sat there, my hands folded in my lap. I didn't speak. I didn't defend myself. I just looked at him. Is that true? Harlan asked, looking at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. You worked on the Ohio report? I opened my mouth. But Charles cut in. She did her best, Charles said quickly. We are handling it. Gabriella has had a hard few years. We are just happy she is well enough to join us for dinner. Isn't that right, darling? He looked at me with a warning in his eyes. Play along. Be the crazy daughter, or I will destroy you. I picked up my glass of water. I took a sip. The soup is excellent. Charles, I said softly. I let the accusation hang there. I let them believe it. Because if they thought I was the weak link, they wouldn't see the trap I had laid. Charles let out a relieved breath. He thought he had won. He thought he had silenced me. Harlan grunted and went back to his meal. But the tension didn't dissipate. After dinner, as the guests were moving to the patio for brandy, Miranda found me. She looked sick. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She grabbed my arm and pulled me into the shadow of a ficus tree. He blamed you, she whispered. He blamed you for the Ohio numbers. You have never even been to the Ohio office. I know, I said. He lied, Miranda said, her voice shaking. He looked right at Harlan Wexford and lied, and he used you to do it. He has been using me for 30 years. Miranda. Miranda looked at me, and then she looked at the door where Charles was laughing with a donor. I went back, she whispered, to the garage, after you left. I stiffened. And? I opened the laptop, she said. I guessed the password. It was founder, wasn't it? It is always founder. She looked up at me, tears spilling over. I saw the files, she said. I saw the metadata, September 12th. He changed them. Yes, I said. He is a fraud, Miranda choked out. And he is going to make me a fraud too. Not if you stop him, I said. I can't, she sobbed. I am scared, Gabby. I am so scared. Go upstairs, I said, gripping her shoulders. Lock your door. Do not sign anything. Do not agree to anything. Just wait until tomorrow. What happens tomorrow? Tomorrow, I said. We tell the truth, Miranda nodded, wiped her face, and fled toward the stairs. She was shaken, but she was awake. That was all I needed. I didn't sleep. I spent the night on the phone with Marceline Shore and Owen Klein. He publicly blamed you? Marceline asked, her voice sharp over the line. That is good. It establishes malice. It proves he is looking for a fall guy. It felt terrible, I admitted. Being looked at like I was broken. It is a performance, Marceline reminded me. Now, listen, the reveal has to be anchored in official records. We cannot make this a family squabble. It has to be about the institution. We have the A. Pierce documents, I said, and the metadata on the fraud. I am drafting a formal complaint to the Attorney General's Charities Division, Marceline said. We will file it Monday morning, but for the gala tomorrow. We need to be careful. You can't just grab the mic and start screaming. I won't scream, I said. I am going to use the university. How? Eldon Ridge is announcing the anonymous benefactor tomorrow. That is me. When they call my name, I am not just going up there to accept a plaque. I am going up there to accept my identity. And once I have the floor, I am going to thank my mother, by name, and by alias. Risky, Marceline said, but effective. If you tie the legacy to A. Pierce publicly, Charles can't sell the rights without admitting he stole them. Exactly. One more thing, Marceline said. The staff. If this blows up, the innocent ones get hurt. Lena, the juniors. You need to warn them. I will, I said. I hung up. I looked at the clock. It was 2 a.m. I sent a text to Lena Hart. Gabriella, meet me in the garden, now. 10 minutes later, Lena appeared, wrapped in a trench coat over her pajamas. She looked terrified. What is it? She whispered. Is Charles firing everyone? No, I said. But the roof is coming down. Lena. Tomorrow, I handed her a folder. It contained copies of the true Ohio numbers, the metadata proof, and a letter of recommendation for her, signed by me in my capacity as CEO of Price Logistics, my real company. What is this? She asked, staring at the letterhead. Price Logistics? You own this? I do, I said. Lena, listen to me. Charles is going to be exposed tomorrow. The fraud is real. He is going to try to blame the staff. He is going to try to blame you and Miranda and me. Lena went white. This folder proves you had nothing to do with it, I said. Keep it safe. If the board asks, you give them this, and if the foundation goes under, you have a job with me, at my real company. Lena looked at me, tears filling her eyes. You are saving us. I am trying, I said. Now go back to bed, and tomorrow, when things start to happen, don't stand next to Charles. The sun rose on Sunday with a cruel brilliance, the gala day. I was in the garage apartment, drinking black coffee, when my phone pinged. It was an email from the dean of Eldon Ridge University. Subject, Gala Announcement. Dear Ms. Price, We are thrilled to confirm that we will be proceeding with the public announcement of your beneficence during the keynote segment today at 2 p.m. We have kept the secret as requested, but we agree that it is time the world knew who has been supporting our adult learners. Please be near the stage. Sincerely, Dean Whitman. I stared at the screen. Charles thought he was about to introduce his unstable daughter to the pitying applause of his friends. He had no idea he was about to introduce the one person who had outgrown him. I put down the coffee. I picked up the Pierce documents. I checked my reflection in the mirror. The navy dress was gone. Today, I was wearing a black suit, sharp, tailored, professional. I wasn't the prop anymore. I walked out of the garage and headed toward the museum. The stage was set. The collision was inevitable. I was ready. The Kendall House Museum was a monument to the kind of wealth that preferred to whisper rather than shout. It was a cavernous space of marble and glass, filled with artifacts of American industry, the perfect backdrop for Charles Price to perform his favorite role, the benevolent Titan. The gala was in full swing by the time I arrived. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the low murmuring hum of people who controlled millions of dollars. Waiters in white jackets moved like ghosts through the crowd, offering champagne and hors d'oeuvres that looked more like art than food. I had changed out of the suit I wore earlier, opting instead for a simple black dress. It was modest, unadorned, and intentionally forgettable. It was the kind of dress a woman wears when she wants to disappear, or when she wants to look like she is there to serve rather than to be served. I pulled my hair back into a low knot and wore no jewelry. I wanted Charles to see me and think defeat. I wanted him to look at me and see the uneducated, worthless daughter who had come to beg for a place at the table. I stood near the entrance, watching him. He was in the center of the room. Naturally, he held a crystal tumbler of scotch, his other hand resting possessively on the shoulder of the mayor. He threw his head back and laughed at something the mayor said, a sound that carried over the string quartet playing in the corner. He looked radiant. He looked invincible. He had no idea that the floor he was standing on was made of paper. And I was holding the match. My phone buzzed in my clutch. It was Owen Klein. I am ready to push the button. The story is drafted. The documentation is attached. Just give me the signal. I typed a reply. My finger steady. Hold. Not yet. I want the documents to land on the record first. If you publish now, he will spin it as a tabloid smear. I need to make the statement. Understood. Owen replied. I am in the press pit. Good luck. I slipped the phone back into my bag and stepped further into the room. Gabriella? The voice was brittle, on the verge of cracking. I turned to see Miranda. She looked like she was vibrating. Her silver gown was stunning, but her skin was the color of ash, and her eyes were wide and darting. She wasn't holding a drink. She was gripping her own elbows as if trying to hold herself together. Hello, Miranda, I said quietly. I need to talk to you, she whispered, pulling me toward a secluded alcove near a display of 19th century textiles. Now, what is it? I found it, she said, her voice shaking. I went back to the office files, the restricted ones you told me about. But I found more. I found the emails to the staff. She took a ragged breath, looking over her shoulder to make sure Charles wasn't watching. He didn't just change the numbers. Gabby, he threatened them. There are emails from Charles to the senior analysts explicitly telling them that if the Ohio data didn't meet the projection, their severance packages would be revoked. He coerced them. He told them to fix the math or lose their livelihoods. I felt a cold surge of anger. He forced them to lie. I am on the email chain, Miranda said, tears welling up in her eyes. He copied me on the last one, just a CC. I didn't even open it until today. But it means I knew, legally, it means I knew. She grabbed my hand, her grip painful. I am going to go to jail, aren't I? I am going to lose everything because he put my name on an email. I looked at my sister. For years, I had seen her as the enemy, the one who stole the affection I craved. But in this moment, I saw the truth. She was just another asset in Charles's portfolio, one he was willing to liquidate if the market turned against him. "You are not going to jail," I said firmly, looking her in the eye. "But you have to make a choice, Miranda, right now." "What choice?" she sobbed softly. "You can stand there and smile and pretend you don't know. And when this blows up, and it will blow up in about an hour, you will go down with him, or you can help me fix it." "How?" "Don't lie for him," I said. "When the questions start, and they will, you tell the truth, you say you saw the emails, you say you were afraid, you cooperate with the independent review." "He will kill me," she whispered. "He will disown me." "He has already disowned you," I said. "The moment he copied you on that email, he made you his human shield. He didn't do that to keep you in the loop. Miranda, he did it so he could blame you if he got caught. He set you up." Miranda stared at me, the horror of it sinking in. She let go of my hand. She looked across the room at Charles, who was now charming a senator's wife. She watched him for a long moment, seeing him, perhaps for the first time, not as a father, but as a predator. "Help fix it," she repeated my words. She took a deep breath and wiped her eyes. Okay, I won't lie." "Good," I said. "Now go wash your face. You need to look strong." She nodded and hurried toward the restrooms. I watched her go, feeling a strange lightness. I hadn't just found evidence, I had found a sister. I checked my watch. 1 hour until the keynote. I made my way through the crowd, nodding politely to people who looked through me. I found a quiet spot near the heavy velvet curtains of the stage entrance and pulled out my phone again. Marceline Shore had sent a secure message. Urgent update regarding the financials. I opened the attachment. It was a scanned document from 1998, a bank transfer record that Marceline's forensic team had dug up from the archives of the defunct shell company Elise had mentioned. I read the details, and the floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. The document showed the initial deposit into the Pricewell Civic Foundation's operating account. $4 million, the seed money that launched the empire. Source: the A. Pierce Trust. Origin: royalties and patent licensing, logistics optimization framework. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring. Charles hadn't found silent partners. He hadn't leveraged his own assets. He hadn't scraped together loans. He had used my mother's money. The A. Pierce alias she used to publish her work had generated significant revenue. Revenue she had placed in a trust for the future implementation of the methodology. She had intended that money to fund the work. Not Charles's ego. He had seized control of the trust after she died, likely using his status as executor to route the funds into the foundation. Scrubbing her name from the transaction and presenting it as an anonymous donation he had secured through his connections. He didn't just steal her ideas. He stole the literal fortune she earned from them to build the pedestal he stood on. He called me uneducated and worthless, while every suit he wore, every gala he threw, every check he wrote was paid for by the genius of the woman he discarded. I closed the phone. The rage that had been burning in me for days cooled into something harder, something diamond sharp. He was a hollow man, a shell. There was nothing inside him but theft. "Gabriella." The voice was right behind me. I turned. Charles was standing there, up close. He smelled of scotch and expensive cologne. His eyes were cold, despite the smile plastered on his face for the benefit of the room. "You are lurking," he said, his voice low and venomous. "I am just waiting for the speeches," I said. "You look—" He looked me up and down, his lip curling in distaste. "Appropriate. For once, you look like you understand your place." "It is a simple dress, Charles." "It is dull," he corrected. "But then, you always were. I saw you talking to Miranda. I hope you weren't filling her head with your paranoia. She has a big night tonight. Don't ruin it for her just because you are miserable." "I am not miserable," I said. "Aren't you?" He took a step closer, boxing me in against the velvet curtain. "Look at you. Gabriella, 33 years old, no husband, no children, a dead-end job filing papers for some trucking company. You live in a shoebox. You drive a wreck. You are a ghost." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that was meant only for me. "Do you know why I invited you this weekend? It wasn't for optics. It was to remind myself that I made the right choice. Every time I look at you, I see your mother, weak, sentimental, useless. You are exactly like her, uneducated and worthless. You will never be anything without my approval, and you will never have that. So enjoy the free champagne, darling. It is the only thing of value you will ever get from this family." My hand twitched. The urge to slap him, to scream the truth right into his smug face, was a physical pain in my chest. I wanted to tell him about the logistics firm. I wanted to tell him about the millions I made. I wanted to tell him I knew about the theft, the fraud, the Pierce money. I wanted to burn him down right here, right now. But I stopped. I looked at him. I saw the fear behind the cruelty. He needed me to be worthless because if I wasn't, then he was the failure. He needed to break me to keep himself whole. If I screamed now, I was just the hysterical daughter. I was the unstable woman he had warned the board about. I took a deep breath. I uncurled my fist. "You are right, Charles," I said softly. "I am exactly like my mother." He sneered, taking it as a concession. "At least you admit it." He turned his back on me and walked away, adjusting his cufflinks, ready to take the stage and accept the applause that belonged to a dead woman. I watched him go. Precision. I told myself, wait for the precision. The lights in the museum dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. The host, Dean Whitman of Eldon Ridge University, stepped up to the podium. He was a tall man with gray hair and a kind face, illuminated by a single spotlight. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dean Whitman began, his voice echoing through the hall, "thank you for joining us on this momentous evening. We are here to celebrate the Pricewell Civic Foundation and its leadership." Charles stood near the front of the stage. Beaming, he nodded to the crowd, accepting the premature adulation. "But tonight," the dean continued, "Eldon Ridge University has a special honor to bestow. For the past 5 years, our adult education program has been quietly transformed by a benefactor who insisted on total anonymity." Charles's smile faltered slightly. He looked confused. He glanced at Elise, who shrugged. This wasn't on the schedule he had approved. "This benefactor," Dean Whitman said, "did not just write checks. This individual designed a new framework for student support. They created a system that addresses the logistics of poverty, transportation, childcare, lost wages. They understood that access to education is not just about tuition, it is about dignity." I felt my heart hammering against my ribs. Dignity. That was the word I had used in my very first email to the university, 5 years ago. This benefactor's contributions have allowed over 300 adults to complete degrees they thought were impossible, the dean said. They have changed the trajectory of families for generations, and they did it while asking for nothing in return. No buildings named after them, no galas. The crowd murmured. Who was this saint? Charles looked annoyed now. He didn't like sharing the spotlight, especially with a mystery. He was probably wondering how he could spin this to take credit for it later. "However," the dean said, smiling, "we recently convinced this individual that their story needs to be told. We convinced them that their example is just as powerful as their money." I took a step forward. Moving out of the shadows of the curtain, "The values this benefactor embodies," the dean said, "are the true legacy of leadership, hard work, humility, and an unshakable belief in human potential." Charles was looking at the dean, waiting for the name of some CEO or politician he could shake hands with. "Please join me," Dean Whitman said, sweeping his arm toward the side of the stage where I was standing, "in welcoming the founder of the Blue Heron Scholarship and the CEO of Price Logistics, Ms. Gabriella Price." The silence that followed was absolute. It lasted for a heartbeat, 2 heartbeats. Then, a gasp rippled through the room. Charles froze. He turned his head slowly, stiffly. looking toward the spot where the dean was pointing. He saw me. I wasn't hiding anymore. I walked out of the shadows, the heels of my simple black shoes clicking rhythmically on the polished floor. I walked past the velvet curtain. I walked past the stunned faces of the board members. I walked past Charles. He looked at me with an expression of total, incomprehensible shock. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. He looked like a man who had seen a ghost, and in a way, he had. I caught his eye as I passed him. I didn't smile. I didn't sneer. I just looked at him with the calm, flat gaze of an auditor who has found the discrepancy. I am exactly like my mother. I thought, and she is done being quiet. I stepped up onto the stage. The spotlight hit me. It was bright, blindingly hot. For a second, I felt the old instinct to shrink, to apologize, to run back to the dark. But then I saw the faces in the front row. I saw Miranda, her hands over her mouth, crying. I saw Lena Hart, clutching the folder I gave her like a lifeline. I saw Owen Klein in the press pit, his phone raised, nodding at me, and I saw Charles, down below, looking small, looking terrified. He thought the spotlight would burn me. He thought I would crumble under the weight of attention. I walked to the podium. I adjusted the microphone. I looked out at the sea of strangers. The spotlight didn't burn. It illuminated. It was mine. "Thank you, Dean Whitman," I said, my voice clear and steady, amplified to fill the cavernous room. "And thank you all for being here." I paused. I looked directly at Charles. "I have a story to tell you," I said, "about the cost of education and the value of the truth." The room was silent. Charles took a step forward, as if to rush the stage, but Harlan Wexford, the board chairman, reached out and grabbed his arm. Harlan wasn't looking at Charles. He was looking at me, listening. Charles was trapped. I took a breath. I reached into the pocket of my simple black dress and touched the flash drive, the letter from my mother, and the timeline of the fraud. It was time to tell him who I really was. The microphone was cold under my hand. The lights were blinding, a wall of white heat that separated me from the darkened room, but I could still see them. I could see the silhouette of my father, Charles Price, frozen near the edge of the stage. I could see the glint of expensive jewelry in the front row. I could feel the silence, heavy and suffocating, waiting for me to speak. Dean Whitman stepped back, leaving me alone at the podium. He had just introduced me as the anonymous benefactor, the architect of a scholarship fund that had saved hundreds of lives. He had called me a visionary, to the room. I was a revelation, to my father. I was an impossibility. I looked down at Charles. His face had drained of color. His mouth was slightly open, a rictus of confusion and dawning horror. He looked like a man trying to solve a math problem in a language he did not speak. He had spent 30 years telling the world, and himself, that I was nothing, uneducated, worthless, a small life. Now, he had to reconcile that narrative with the woman standing above him. I leaned into the microphone. My voice did not shake. "Good afternoon," I said. "For a long time, the name Price has been synonymous with a certain kind of success in this room. Prestige, influence, the appearance of perfection." I paused. I saw Harlan Wexford, the board chairman, leaning forward in his chair. "But appearances can be curated," I continued, "and narratives can be edited. My father, Charles Price, has often introduced me as his daughter who never finished anything. He has told you I am uneducated. He has told you I am a cautionary tale." I looked directly at Charles. "The truth is," I said, "I did not finish my degree at the university my father chose. I left because I realized that the education he valued was about status, not substance. Instead, I worked. I waited tables during the day and took night classes in supply chain management. I earned my bachelor's degree from a state college in 2015. I earned my master's degree in logistics 3 years later, graduating top of my class." A ripple of murmurs went through the room. Charles flinched as if I had thrown a stone at him. I did not use the Price name, I said. I built my career as Gabriella Vance, using my mother's maiden name. Today, I am the CEO and majority owner of Price Logistics, a firm that manages supply chains for mid-sized manufacturing across the Northeast. The small job my father mocked is a company with 40 employees and an annual revenue that exceeds the operating budget of this foundation. The murmurs grew louder. I saw respect dawning on the faces of the donors. They understood revenue. They understood building something from nothing. I do not tell you this to brag, I said. I tell you this because for years, I allowed my silence to be interpreted as failure. I allowed my father to define me because I was afraid of the conflict. But I learned something important from the adult learners I support through the Blue Heron Scholarship. I gripped the sides of the podium. I learned that you cannot build a future if you are lying about the foundation. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the flash drive. I held it up. It was a small, black rectangle, insignificant in size, but heavy with consequence. This foundation, I said, my voice hardening, claims to champion the truth. It claims to value integrity. Yet, the very methodology that the Pricewell Civic Foundation is celebrating this weekend, the Legacy Loop Framework, was not created by Charles Price. Charles took a step forward. "Gabriella," he barked, finding his voice. "That is enough. Get down from there. You are embarrassing yourself." The crowd gasped at his tone. It wasn't the voice of a philanthropist. It was the voice of a bully. "I am not done," I said, cutting him off. The Legacy Loop was authored in 1996 by a brilliant sociologist who understood that poverty is a logistics problem. She wrote the white papers. She designed the intervention models. She created the intellectual property that this foundation is built on. I looked at the screen behind me, where the foundation's logo was projected. Her name was Eleanor Price, I said. "My mother." Charles looked like he had been punched in the gut. He stumbled back, gripping the back of a chair for support. "Charles Price claimed my mother was too fragile for this work," I said. "He claimed she never contributed, but the documents I hold, and the documents that were delivered to the Board of Directors and the State Attorney General's office at 9 o'clock this morning, prove otherwise." "Lies," Charles shouted. He turned to the crowd, his arms wide, his face flushed red. "She is unstable. I told you. She's having a breakdown. Security, get her off the stage." 2 security guards hesitated near the wall. They looked at Harlan Wexford. Harlan held up a hand, stopping them. He stared at me, his face grim. "Let her speak," Harlan said. His voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of authority. Charles spun around to look at Harlan, betrayal written all over his face. "Harlan, you cannot be serious. She is mentally ill." "I am not mentally ill, Father," I said calmly. "I am legally represented." I looked back at the audience. My mother published her work under the pseudonym A. Pierce's to protect herself from professional retaliation, I said. She set up a trust with the royalties from her patents. That trust, the A. Pierce Trust, provided the $4 million of seed money that launched this foundation in 1998. Charles Price did not fund this foundation with silent partners. He funded it by seizing the assets of the wife he marginalized. The room was deadly silent now, the kind of silence that precedes a verdict. "He stole her credit," I said. "He stole her money, and he used both to build a pedestal for himself, while telling her daughter she was worthless." I saw Elise in the front row. She was staring at her lap, tears streaming down her face. She knew. She had always known. "But theft is history," I said. "What is happening now is fraud." I gestured to the screen again. "The Ohio Initiative," I said, "the flagship program you are all being asked to fund today. My father claims it has an 85% success rate. He is selling the methodology to a private equity firm based on that number." I looked at the flash drive in my hand. "The real number is 32%, I said. "On September 12th, Charles Price accessed the internal servers from his home IP address and altered the completion data. He created 500 graduates who do not exist. He fired the compliance officer who tried to stop him. He threatened the staff. "You have no proof," Charles screamed. He was unraveling now, his tie crooked, his hair wild. "It is a fabrication. She is jealous. She wants my money." "I don't want your money," I said. "I have my own, and as for proof," I looked down at Miranda. My sister was standing near the edge of the stage. She looked small in her silver dress, but her head was up. She was looking at me. I nodded to her. Miranda walked up the stairs. The sound of her heels was the only noise in the room. She walked to the center of the stage and stood beside me. She didn't look at the crowd. She looked at Charles. "Miranda," Charles said, his voice changing, becoming wheedling, desperate. "Miranda, honey, tell them your sister is lying. Tell them we worked on those numbers together. Tell them it is a mistake." Miranda took a deep breath. She leaned into the microphone. Her voice shook, but her words were clear. "It wasn't a mistake," Miranda said. Charles froze. "I saw the emails," Miranda said. "I saw the threats you sent to the analysts. I saw the original data files before you changed them. Gabriella is telling the truth." "Miranda!" Charles roared. "How dare you? I gave you everything. I made you." "You made me a liar," Miranda said, her voice breaking. "And I don't want to be one anymore." She stepped back. Trembling, I reached out and took her hand. Her fingers were ice cold, but she squeezed mine back. Charles looked at us, his two daughters, the disappointment and the golden child, standing together against him. He lost it. He scrambled up the stairs, moving with a frantic, jerky energy. He grabbed for the microphone, knocking the podium askew. "Ungrateful!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Both of you, worthless. I built this family. I built this name. You are nothing without me. Nothing." He turned to the crowd, panting, his eyes wild. "Don't listen to them," he pleaded. "They are children. They don't understand business. They don't understand what it takes to lead. I did what I had to do. I did it for the foundation." "You did it for yourself, Charles," Harlan Wexford said. Harlan had walked up the stairs behind him. He signaled to the security guards. This time, they didn't hesitate. "Mr. Price," the guard said, taking Charles's arm, "we need you to step down." "Get your hands off me," Charles shouted, trying to wrench free. "Do you know who I am? I am the chairman. I own this building." "Not anymore," Harlan said quietly. "The board is convening an emergency session immediately. Pending the investigation into the allegations of fraud and embezzlement, you are suspended from all duties." Charles looked at Harlan. He looked at the donors, who were watching him with a mixture of pity and disgust. He looked at the press, whose cameras were flashing in a frenzy. Then he looked at me. There was no anger left in his eyes, just a vast, terrified emptiness. He realized, finally, that the mirror had broken. "Gabriella," he whispered. "Please." It was the first time in my life he had ever said my name without a demand or an insult attached to it. He was begging. I looked at him. I felt a pang of sadness, but it was a distant thing, like looking at an old photograph of a stranger. "It is over, Dad," I said softly. The guards led him away. He didn't fight. He slumped between them, a man whose entire existence had been a performance, dragged off the stage before the applause could start. The room was chaotic. People were standing, talking, shouting questions. The dean looked shell-shocked. A woman in the front row, a major donor named Mrs. Vanderwall, stood up. She had a sharp, intelligent face. "Miss Price," she called out, her voice cutting through the noise. I looked at her. "You have destroyed your father's reputation," she said. "You have likely destroyed this foundation. You have humiliated your family in front of the entire city." She paused. "Are you doing this for revenge?" she asked. The question hung in the air. Revenge. It was a dirty word. It implied pettiness. It implied that I enjoyed this. I looked at Mrs. Vanderwall. I looked at the staff members huddled in the corner. Lena Hart, who was crying with relief. I looked at the adult students in the back who had received the scholarships, who had come to see their benefactor. Revenge is about the past, I said into the microphone. It is about settling a score. This is not about the past. This is about the future. I gestured to the students in the back. There are people in this room who believe in the mission of this foundation, I said. There are people who need the support it promised. They deserve a foundation that is not built on a lie. They deserve to know that their success is not a statistic being manipulated for profit. I looked at Miranda, who was wiping her eyes. And shame, I said, my voice quiet but firm, thrives in silence. My father relied on my shame to keep his secrets. He relied on my sister's shame to keep her compliant. He relied on the shame of his staff to keep them quiet. Today, we decided to stop being ashamed. I stepped back from the podium. The documentation is with the authorities, I said. The truth is on the record. Thank you. I turned and walked off the stage. I didn't run. I didn't hide. I walked down the stairs, holding Miranda's hand. The crowd parted for us like the Red Sea. No one said a word. They just watched us pass. Two women walking out of a glass house that had finally shattered. The air outside the museum was cold and clean. It smelled of the ocean and wet pavement. The press was waiting at the bottom of the steps. As soon as we pushed through the doors, the flashbulbs erupted. A wall of noise hit us. Shouted questions. Microphones thrust in our faces. Ms. Price, is it true your father embezzled the money? Miranda, are you resigning? Gabriella, how long have you known? I saw Owen Klein standing near a news van. He gave me a small, solemn nod. He had hit publish. The story was live. The documents were out there. The world knew about A. Pierce. The world knew about the Ohio numbers. I stopped on the landing. I raised a hand, and the reporters quieted down. Sensing that I was about to speak, I have a brief statement, I said. I looked at the cameras. I wanted to make sure Charles saw this on the evening news. The evidence regarding the Pricewell Civic Foundation is now public, I said. My sister and I will be cooperating fully with the Attorney General's investigation. We are committed to ensuring that the legitimate assets of the foundation are preserved and used for their intended purpose. Education. What about your father? A reporter shouted. Do you have a message for him? I thought about the man who had mocked me. I thought about the man who had erased my mother. I thought about the man who was currently sitting in a security holding room, watching his life dissolve. No, I said. I have no message for him. I have said everything I needed to say. I turned to Miranda. Ready? Ready, she said. She looked pale, but she wasn't shaking anymore. We walked down the steps, past the cameras, past the shouting reporters. A black sedan was waiting at the curb. My car. Not a leased wreck, but the company car I had bought myself 3 years ago. I opened the door for Miranda. She slid in. I walked around to the driver's side. Before I got in, I looked back at the museum one last time. It looked different now. It didn't look like a palace. It looked like just a building, stone and glass. I got in the car. I started the engine. Where are we going? Miranda asked. I don't know, I said. Do you want to get a burger? Miranda let out a laugh that sounded like a sob. I would kill for a burger, and maybe a milkshake. Done, I said. I pulled away from the curb, leaving the gala, the foundation, and the ghost of Charles Price behind us. I drove toward the highway. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't need to fill the silence. For the first time in 33 years, the silence wasn't heavy. It wasn't empty. It was peaceful. My name is Gabriella Price. I am the daughter of Eleanor Price, the architect of the Legacy Loop. I am the sister of Miranda Price, the baker, and I am uneducated and worthless no more. Thank you so much for listening to Gabriella's story. It has been a journey of uncovering truth, fighting for dignity, and breaking the silence that protects toxic systems. I hope you found satisfaction in seeing the house of cards finally fall. I would love to hear from you. Please comment below and tell me where you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories so you never miss an episode. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Charles deserved what happened? Was Gabriella right to protect Miranda? Let's discuss.